coming to you from the home of Franklin's finest. This is the APB podcast. Here now is Franklin Police Public Information Manager, Max Winitz.
Hi there, everybody. I'm Max Winitz. Welcome to this special edition of the APB podcast. We are commemorating the September 11th anniversary today, and we're being joined by Officers Domenico Buffa and Chris Doyle, both of whom native New Yorkers, both of whom worked for the NYPD before, or after 9/11, I should say. But we're going to learn today that 9/11 sort of inspired them to get into the world of law enforcement. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for sitting down today. Dom, I know this is your second appearance on the podcast, so great to have you with us again. And Chris, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Let's go ahead and first just introduce yourselves. Share a little bit about your New York roots. Dom, we'll start with you.
So I started the NYPD in 2012, and I was assigned to Brooklyn North, East Harlem, Bronx, Manhattan. Throughout my time there, I worked on the traffic unit, the 25th Precinct, and I eventually went to the New York City Highway Patrol.
Chris, yourself.
I joined the New York City Police Department in 2018. I also worked in East Harlem, left in 2021 to come down to the great city of Franklin, where I'm at now.
And what drew both of you to this area? You know, being native New Yorkers, you spend all of your lives there, and you find out about an opportunity in Franklin, Tennessee. Dom?
So I came down here for a concert in Nashville, and I stayed here, excuse me, for at an Airbnb, and I said, this town is absolutely awesome. And when push came to shove, I said, it's ready to move. We're ready to move, and we're going to go. Let's go to Franklin. So that's what brought me here.
Similar story?
Yeah, well, my wife and I both like Nashville, but working for New York City, I know how a big city environment was. So we learned about Franklin, came to visit. It happened to be pilgrimage weekend, so it was a little busier than normal, but we got to see that this is a beautiful town that does have events for you to do if you like music or live entertainment, stuff like that. So it kind of has the best of both worlds without being up in Nashville, and that really kind of drew us into where we're at now.
So music drew both of you down here?
Pretty much, right?
Yeah. What first drew you both into careers in law enforcement?
You can start, Chris.
Just kind of growing up, I had some family, friends, and like distant relatives that were in the law enforcement profession, as well as like first responder services. I had an instance when I was younger where the police were called to my house, and I was about 7 or 8, so I didn't know much what was going on, and it wasn't anything drastic. But as a little kid, you see police show up with uniform on, I think it's like 1 or 2 in the morning. So being that young, you see that, and you're kind of like, it's almost like a superhero. So I kind of wanted to get into the profession and explore public service, and kind of led me down this path.
Tom?
Very similar. My dad was a police officer for almost 30 years, and my mom was a registered nurse. So like you said, the superhero thing kind of was that same realm. I would see my dad come home in his uniform all the time and hear about what he does and see what he does. My mom used to take me to go see him at work, and I thought it was the coolest thing. Those two people are my heroes. So why would you not want to be like your hero? So years later, I turned 21 and I became a police officer, just like my dad.
So let's go back to September 11th, 2001. Both of you obviously young at the time, but both of you remember the events of that day vividly. Chris, we'll start with you. Tell me about what you were doing, where you were when that first plane struck into the World Trade Center.
So I think I was only 5 years old. I think right when everything was starting to transpire was right at the time where I was getting out of school. I remember coming home, and as a little kid, I'd come home and things were, generally pretty normal, but that day something felt odd. Just talking to my mom, she seemed kind of in an odd, abnormal mood. And then seeing on the TV, obviously it showed the building burning down, people running everywhere. So being pretty young, I didn't really put everything together, but I still could see that and be like, something doesn't seem right with what's...
As a 5-year-old, do you know the World Trade Center? Did you know those buildings at that time?
No, I don't think I had the chance to go into New York City and view that before this all happened.
Yeah. Dom, you were a little bit older. Tell me about that day for you.
So I think it was in 6th or 7th grade, and same as him, like it was time to go home from school, and they locked our whole school down. It was on complete lockdown, even though it was in New York City, which is about 50 plus miles away from us, but they didn't know what was going on. So I remember having to get under the desk and do all the procedures they had, and something like that, being in 6th and 7th grade, that is one thing you don't forget. Get home. I think my dad had just gotten home from work. He worked for a small police department that was near our town. And same thing, he was talking to his friends, calling his friends. My mom was calling her friends. And we just learned about the devastation. And honestly, from then on, I saw my parents. It took a toll on my parents. For me as a kid, not as much, but just seeing my parents and now thinking back of how my parents were back then, it really took a hit on them, for sure.
And obviously, as a sixth grader, I mean, you're well aware of Lower Manhattan.
Yeah.
Did you visit there?
Yeah, I've actually been there a couple times with my parents to the Statue of Liberty and whatnot beforehand.
So how did that day, just thinking back, and the memories may be stronger for you because you were older, Dom, but I mean, how did that day just impact you personally?
For me, seeing how upset my parents were and trying to figure out what they were talking about, because I didn't know super big terms that they were using, but sad watching stuff on TV and seeing that people in crisis and running around, people crying, trying to find other people, and just every news station you turned on, it was just, this had happened, the plane hit this building, another plane hit here. So for me, it kind of made things real. As a kid, you're happy-go-lucky, you don't really have any, worries. And now it's like, oh man, a plane hit a building. You don't think that that's going to happen at that age. So for me, it was like, wow, that's kind of serious. So.
And Chris, how did that day impact you on a personal level?
I think for me, being so young at the time, it was kind of one of those things that hit me later on in life when I learned more about what exactly took place that day. And as the older I got, the more I learned about 9/11, just going through school and eventually becoming a police officer. I kind of think back to like how I interpreted it that day at 5 years old, and it kind of stuck with me as very impactful.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. One of you, I want to say, your families knew people who were in the building or near Ground Zero at the time. Is that accurate? Or am I thinking of somebody else? Chris, I thought you had told me once before that your family knew some people, but maybe I'm wrong.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
So my wife, her uncle was a firefighter for one of
maybe
the
was
lower Manhattan fire companies. And I'm pretty sure he was the only one that didn't go to work that day.
Wow.
And he was the only one that survived because his whole company went there, and they were blocks away. And he, thank God, was not there at work that day. So that's pretty impactful as well, even for me, just thinking back, like Chris said, thinking of it now in hindsight after everything happened, that's pretty crazy.
Is it fair to say that the events on 9/11 did help the both of you recognize a little bit later in life, seeing the heroism? You mentioned the superhero comparison earlier, but seeing the heroism of the police officers and firefighters, did that day help you realize you wanted to become a police officer, Chris?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, besides that one incident I mentioned earlier, I didn't really have a lot of interaction with police or firemen, so that was probably the only thing I really got to see them in action on. So it may just be one of those things where someone who's 5, 6 years old sees the police on a crash scene and gets inspired by that, or they get a good feeling about it or something. So I think kind of seeing the need for police and first responders for that definitely justified me being where I'm at right now.
Tom?
For sure. That plus seeing my parents do it every day, coming home, going to work. I remember even seeing pictures of that day, that day, and seeing it now as an adult. Just those police officers helping people through the streets covered in soot, wearing their masks and everything like that. For me, it's like, hey, I want to help people, and that's what we're here to do, and that's our goal.
Is there my next question kind of segues off of what you just said, but is there a specific moment or an image that you remember that has really stuck with you from that day?
Yeah, that image of that New York City police officer helping, I think, a lady across the street, and you could see all the streets has soot all over it, ash, fire trucks, and another one is a FDNY firefighter riding his Harley Davidson on his own personal Harley Davidson through Lower Manhattan to go. That for me is just crazy. I mean, that's what made me want to become a cop even more, just to help people.
Yeah.
And I was thankful to do that for 10 years in New York City, and I'm thankful to do that for almost 5 years here.
Chris, what images, again, I know you're 5, but since that time, I'm sure there's some piece of video or a still image somewhere that, sticks out to you, especially being a New Yorker, of that, that horrible day.
Yeah, I mean, the day it happened, I remember watching the news. There was, you saw several people that were obviously injured, like you said, covered in soot. And they were surrounded by police, firemen, EMTs, I'm sure, and it seemed like they were kind of being led to safety, and that it was like a constant relay where they're going back and forth and grabbing more people, bringing them to a safe area, and you get the feeling that these responders are working like overtime trying to get people safe.
During your time at NYPD, I would suspect that you had friends who were still employed with the department, who worked for the department on 9/11. What sort of stories would they tell you?
So I got to meet several people who either responded to the actual 9/11 incident or the aftermath. I met people that were at the scene and there for months after, and I think they both kind of had a similar traumatic story. I know some of the officers afterwards were kind of doing like a search mission after that point, just trying to recover any victims. So obviously that could be pretty taxing, just doing that for months on end. And even the ones that responded but were physically okay at the time, I know some of them had long-lasting illnesses and injuries that they'll never get rid of, just from the amount of pollution and everything else going on that day.
What do you guys think of that there are still first responders dying as a result of what they breathe in that day, or those several days in the aftermath?
Yeah, it's crazy. And like Chris said, I knew a bunch of people. When I got on the job in New York City, I had some field training officers that had 20 years, that had all the time that they were there. And that was me, curious, talking to them like, hey, what was it like? What'd you do? And they said they worked nonstop for months afterwards in Lower Manhattan just to go through the rubble to see who was there. One guy I worked with, he was a canine handler at the time of 9/11, and he brought his dog there. And his dog ended up passing away from 9/11 type illnesses. Also, the dog burned their paws trying to go through all the stuff that's still hot underneath. It just blows my mind about the courage that those guys had and those girls had to go do that. And for them to still, to this day, have to realize, that they were there and this happened. And unfortunately, some of them, like you said, have illnesses, respiratory illnesses from even wearing a mask. I know a guy that wore a mask every single time he went down to the site, and he still ended up getting some sort of breathing or cancer or whatever it was. Thankfully, he's still going. And but yeah, it's impacts people this many years after.
Yeah. Here we are, another anniversary. I mean, what goes through both of your heads on the 9/11 anniversary? Chris, I'll start with you.
Obviously, it's a bit of a sad day just to kind of think about that. Number one, the event even happened, but just like we said earlier, I think last time we talked, was that everybody from New York is affected by 9/11 somehow. Whether it's you had a family member who passed away, or you knew a friend who responded and got ill, or even for me, when I went to go work for the New York City Police Department, I met a lot of great people that work there that respond to 9/11, and you can tell like some of it is taking a toll on their body medically just from the things they were exposed to. So everyone's story may not be as drastic as, my father was a police officer and got killed, or my mother was working the World Trade Center. Everyone has their story, whether it's super impactful or just somebody who responded, family friend or whatever, and they are somehow affected by it. And it's kind of like, it's one of those things when you meet a New Yorker. I don't think most of them at least were alive for 9/11. They probably all have someone they can tell you, yeah, I knew this person that was involved, or they met someone down the road that had some lasting effect from it.
Yeah, I mean, going to school at Quinnipiac in Connecticut, 90-minute MTA ride from New Haven. So many of my classmates were New Yorkers, and everybody knew somebody, it seemed. So
And it's just crazy to think about, like, the area it's in and that someone could even pull that off is just kind of baffling.
yeah. Dom, same question for you. In a couple of days from now, on the anniversary, is there what goes through your head each anniversary?
Obviously, I feel for every single person that has been affected by it, whether, like Chris said, they lost someone or not. And for those that responded there and had to do the job on that scene and to find people and all those things, it's just beyond what I could ever think of. But for me, even being so young, I remember the days after that and how, like, it's weird, but how united everybody kind of felt. And that really stands out in my mind. I remember, like, people from across the state or across the country came to help here. And that was that just like any other disaster where we send people to go anywhere. Other states came to help us in any way they could. People from Long Island would send food there. One of my favorite places to eat in my hometown they had a flag in their lobby, and they had that flag that was from there because they would send food for a week or two straight to all the first responders there.
Yeah.
So that sense of unity that everybody came together really stood out, and you would see it on the news, you would hear it on the radio, you would see it in person. Like, it was crazy to see that.
The World Series with Bush throwing out the first pitch. I mean,
Crazy.
that brings back so many
Yeah,
memories.
yeah.
And I know the blood banks were overwhelmed by people who wanted to donate blood. But yeah, you hit if there's a silver lining, and I
was it.
hate even saying that about 9/11, it's that unity factor.
I think that's what from what I can remember, that was the most united I think we've ever felt in a long, long time.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it took 9/11 to make that happen.
All right. Feel the same way?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, being younger at the time, it's kind of hard to really know, but obviously looking back, and you can find videos, like you mentioned, George Bush throwing the first pitch. I think the other one was the Yankees game when they found out that Bin Laden was captured. They were all chanting USA, and just, it's kind of like I guess, for that time, it's being a New Yorker, everyone was pretty,
Yeah.
united.
What do you hope people remember most about 9/11's impact on service? Dom?
I hope that they remember and never forget that it impacts everyone. Everyone that went to that scene, everyone that has a family member that was either affected or lost their life that day, that it will never go away. It'll always be something that will be in their hearts and in their memory. So just pray for them and make sure that whenever this time of year comes around, know that it's kind of tough for everybody, even not just in New York City, everywhere across the country, because I've even met people that I lived in New York City during this time, or so on and so forth. And it's just crazy how it wasn't an isolated incident, because it affected the entire country.
Yeah.
So
And we would be remiss if we didn't mention, obviously there's the Pentagon in
Yeah.
Pennsylvania as well. Chris, what do you want people to remember about,
Just kind of, I mean, it's crazy to think how many, just to count the amount of first responders who lost their lives on that day alone, not including the line of duty illnesses that came years afterwards from medical illness and other stuff. But think about how many people went to work that day, whether they were unexpecting it, or they were called into work because of the mass chaos, and they had no idea that was going to be their last day alive. So I hope we think of it as like honestly, I think the word I'm looking for, like gratefulness almost, for some first responders who leave, let's say, I think all the NYPD officers that were available to come into work were summoned to work. So
Yeah.
they pretty much threw a bag together, left their family, and had no idea whether they were going to make it home. So I think there should be some, appreciation for the sacrifices that were made, and never forget that some people, paid the ultimate sacrifice by responding to that day.
I mean, now that both of you are in law enforcement, I mean, you could look at images a lot differently now since you're in this career, but when you inevitably you're going to see the footage in a couple of days from 9/11, but now that you're in law enforcement and you guys see what law enforcement did that day, I mean, how much does that impact you? How much does that hit you on a professional level?
A lot, because sadly enough, that could be us one day, and you have to realize that. Thank God that we are in an area that we are, and it's a great place to be, but you never know what could happen that day. And like Chris said, you go to work, and that could be your last day. So just knowing that and just seeing that on the news and all these videos, like, you know, you can't know each individual officer that was there on scene. So it's like, hey, man, like, did that guy make it out? You know, hopefully they're still alive today, you know, going forward with any of these illnesses that from all the debris there. So it really impacts you, you know, like, and it makes it makes me want to do more. It makes me want to help more because those people gave their lives for it. So as long as I'm alive, I can try to help as many people as I possibly can.
So fair to say, Chris, that you look at these officers, whether they're police, fire, EMS, you may not know their names, but you see the video. Consider them, you know, role models as far as the law enforcement profession is concerned?
Yeah, I mean, 'cause I think it's fair to say that everybody there, whether it's police, fire, EMS, they all kind of dropped their roles and worked together no matter what it was. So I mean, you think of police and what their normal roles were that day. I mean, they're jumping in there with fire, EMS, and everyone's working together and pretty much doing the same exact thing, almost like one team, one fight.
Yeah.
It's a slogan we use a lot.
Have either of you been to the museum since it opened? I mean, I went there in just a couple of years ago. We were there for a wedding. I mean, it was, I tearing up. I mean, that in the Holocaust Museum in D.C. have really impacted me. But 9/11, what they did there with the everything on display is
Fire
remarkable.
truck that's downstairs.
Yeah. You have not been yet?
So I went with 2018 when
Okay.
we do the police academy now in New York City. I'm assuming they still do this, but they made a day of it where you go
Really?
down and see the World Trade Center, and it's crazy because you don't think about how many people lost their lives
Yeah.
until you see the amount of names on the walls,
Mm-hmm.
and they have etched into the stone there outside the museum, and you go through that. And if you had to take a count, I would say hundreds, if not thousands, of people are on that wall who lost their life either at 9/11 or sometime after.
What was your biggest takeaways from the museum?
When you go downstairs and you see the fire truck there and you see how massive that truck is and how mangled it was, and you stand inside the base of the tower and you realize how big that building was and that's now a little fire truck in there, I just think of how many of those cops and firefighters and EMS were digging through all that stuff in that square footage to try to get to people.
Yeah.
And how many floors there were and how it came down. It's just unbelievable. And like Chris said, you know, guys and girls went to work as a firefighter, as a police officer, as EMS, but when they got there, they kind of like gave up their roles and they worked together. So it might be Mike and Steve as a firefighter, but those are Mike and Steve working with other guys and girls that wanted to just make sure they can get as many people out as they could. So for me, that's the camaraderie that I enjoy, being able to know that we're all here to do the same thing.
Yeah. I think you guys hit the nail on the head. Is there anything else at all you want to add that I didn't ask you about as far as the anniversary is concerned, or the role law enforcement played that day?
No, I don't. It's like you said. It's. We're always going to try and remember it the best we can. It'll forever be a sad day, both for all the first responders, but also every civilian that responded, went to work like a normal work day. I mean, that building was huge, as you saw. So the amount of employees and just civilians in the building too was drastic. So there's always going to be people who are forever impacted by it, and now it's on us to try and remember it and never forget that day.
Yeah. Dom, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, just like pretty much what Chris said. Like, it's unfortunate that it happened, but I just think about how many people it motivated to be firefighters, police officers, EMS. You know, that day, whether it be you be young or old, hey, like, I want to do this. I saw those people helping and saving lives and doing whatever they could. I want to do that too. So you kind of take a bad event and turn it into a good event, because
Positive.
someone else that became a cop or whatever after that could have saved someone else's life. So it kind of, in my opinion, is the silver lining, like you said earlier, out of the story. So, and I just pray that it never happens again.
Yeah.
Anywhere. I don't care where it is. I just don't want it to happen again. Even if it means people come together, we could do it in other ways. And just there's no need for that to happen ever again.
Yeah. All right.
So,
Officer Domenico Buffa, Officer Chris Doyle, thank you guys for your time. Really
Appreciate
appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
And that's going to do it for this edition of the APB podcast. We'll see you next time, and stay safe, everybody.